still have a W-2 job, right?
I do. Yeah, I still have a full-time job.
And where is that?
I work for a fintech. So a lot of the people I work with are on the West Coast. I work remotely. Everybody works remotely. A lot of people I work with are on the West Coast. So their day doesn't get started until, like 9 a.m. Pacific time. I'm in the central time zone in Tennessee. So I've even when I didn't have a side thing, I normally had like a couple hours in the morning, depending how early I got up, 2 or 3 hours in the morning to like focus on like deep work or like uninterrupted work. And so what that has allowed me to do with the business is that's when I get a chance to like really kick things off for the day or like focus on any of the longer term investments I'm trying to make. So yeah, it's been a bit of a juggle. I mentioned I had kids, and I mentioned that I have a 7-month-old. So the timing of the business acquisition coincided with the timing of the birth of my daughter, who is 7 months old. So back in the very end of May, my daughter was born on June 5th. I closed on the business on May 31st. So basically a week after that, my daughter was born. The company I work for, my day job, I get paternity leave. So I had basically 2 months of paternity leave that I took at that point. And during that paternity leave, I was spending like every day in the business, just like, spending 50 to 60 hours a week trying to learn the thing, trying to understand what made it work, what didn't work, trying to wrap my head around things. So the company I own is a tree and landscaping business. I didn't have any like specific tree experience before I bought it. And so those first couple months were really about learning things, and like understanding not just like the business side of things, but just understanding the nitty gritty details of the day to day and like how we bring trees down, how we quote jobs, how we make money, what kind of things do we lose money on, like all that kind of stuff. And so I was working on that basically 7 days a week for that entire period of time that I was off from my day job. So the timing of that worked out well, but it's also like super, super chaotic, having a newborn around and also trying to do that. Yeah. And then from there, like after I went back to work, so a month before I returned to my day job, I hired a general manager to basically like run the day-to-day things. Just like do quoting of jobs, send the crews off, like get everybody set up for the day. And so I had a month of like training him on the job before I had to return to my 9 to 5. And that worked out pretty well. I don't know that I would change anything. I don't know that I would change a whole lot about how I did that if I had a chance to do it again. It seemed like that was the best way to do it. But anyway, so that's where I'm at today.
So why did you decide to buy a tree and landscape business?
I mean, there was nothing like specifically about tree and landscaping that I was really looking for. But I had an itch for a really long time to start a business or to buy a business, like for multiple years. And it had gotten to the point where I was like thinking about it way too much. To the point where I told my wife at the beginning of last year, I said, like, I'm committing this year to either do it or stop thinking about it. Like it's taking up too much mental bandwidth. I'm either going to start a business or I'm going to buy one, or we're never going to talk about this again at the end of this year. So I spent a whole lot of time in the first 4 months of the year being really intentional about looking for businesses, about thinking through different business ideas. Interestingly, I wasn't specifically looking for a tree business to buy, but if I were to start a business, it was going to be one of the options was a tree business. And there's a few reasons for that. So I live in Memphis. Memphis has just a lot of really mature trees. Especially I live out in the suburbs, and I just have always thought like a good tree business could print money out here. And so if I was going to start a business, that's what I was going to do. The other thing is we have a little bit of space here. I live on a little bit of land, And we have, I don't know, hundreds of trees. And if I'm honest with you, probably like 50 of them need to come down. And so this is probably not a good reason to buy a business or start a business. But I was like, well, if I start the business, I could learn at my own place. I could go slowly. I could acquire the equipment as needed to like figure things out here. If I screw something up, I don't have anybody angry with me other than myself. It seemed like pretty low risk from that perspective. But the more I thought about it, man, tree businesses are like very equipment heavy business, yours too. And so like to do that, I have to buy a skid steer, almost certainly. I have to buy a bucket truck. I have to buy a grapple truck. The list goes on, right? And before you know it, you got at least a couple $100,000 in equipment that I would have to buy just to like start something. And so being that I now am in a different stage of life than I was, a decade ago when I was willing to take more risks. With kids, with a wife, my wife doesn't work, my family's entirely dependent upon my ability to earn income. And so if I'm honest, I'm like a little bit more risk averse now than I was previously. A decade ago, I'd have been like, whatever, let's do it. And I've done other things that, risked a bunch of money, and some of them turned out, some of them didn't turn out, and I was fine with that. But I was like risk averse to the point that the more I thought about starting from scratch, spending a couple $100,000 with no guarantee of any kind of no guarantee that I could get clients, no guarantee that I could convince people to pay for our services, the less appealing that seemed to me. And so it was at that point I started pivoting away from that and really started focusing specifically on searching for a business to buy. And when I was searching for a business, I wasn't looking specifically for a tree business. I was just looking for something that was profitable, that I could like sink my teeth into, and really have confidence that I could grow over time. And so it just so happened that the business that I found was a tree business, but that was more coincidence than like specifically looking for that.
Is this business in your area? Like, did you have geographic constraints?
I did have geographic constraints. I was looking for something specifically in the Memphis area. We weren't going to move. I have flexibility with my day job. I work remotely, but my wife, born and raised in Memphis, spent her entire life in Memphis. We have family here. Again, now that we have kids, grandparents are here. Like, we're just not moving our kids. We're not moving our family. And we had just bought a new house, like, less than a year prior, that my wife and I, when we bought it, had the idea, like, this is the place where we will be for a really long time. And so, yeah, I was specifically looking in the Memphis area. So I live in Germantown, which is a suburb on the east side of Memphis. The business is based in Millington, which is kind of a suburb on the north side of Memphis. So when I go we have a lot in Millington where we keep all of our equipment, where we meet up for the day with the crew and everything. That drive for me in the morning is like 40 minutes. So I basically drive across town to make that happen.
And whenever you were looking for this business, how did you end up finding it?
So I found it in the place I did not think I was going to find a business, which is Biz Buy Sell. If you spend any time on Biz Buy Sell, there's just a bunch of trash on there, honestly, and a bunch of franchises. And I was specifically not wanting a franchise. I don't know that I can articulate exactly why, but it just always had like an aversion to a franchise, at least being the first business that I have. I mentioned I'm more risk averse, but I don't know. I'm still very prideful, and so I wanted to fail or succeed on my own abilities and my own merits. And again, this is probably not super healthy pride, but franchise, to me, there are two downsides of it at a very high level. The first is always, whether this is true or not, I always had the idea that like my upside would be capped with a franchise, because I would always be paying fees to to the parent company. And then the other side of it is that my downside would also be limited. And I don't know, that might seem an interesting thing to people, but like I care very much about being good at what I do and succeeding on my own merits. And so there's some part of me that's like, no. If the business is going to fail, I want it to fail. And I want to learn the lessons of failure. And I want to, like, I don't know, this might be a little masochistic, but like, I want to learn that I wasn't good enough to do that thing. um, and so I just kind of like wrote off franchises pretty early on. But like the vast majority of the other stuff that's listed on Biz by Sell, at least in the Memphis area, is like pretty worthless. And so I had looked at a bunch of other places. I was cold calling businesses. I was doing all that kind of stuff. But where I found this business was on Biz by Sell. It had been listed for over a year. Turns out that the previous owner had had multiple offers, had actually gotten really close to selling a couple times, and just like had things fall through. So, and when I made an offer on the business, there was another offer that came in like within days. So it was a business that was like desirable. Now, we can talk about whether or not, knowing what I know today, it would still be desirable, but it was a desirable business from the numbers and what I was able to find out about it. But yeah, it was just like publicly listed through a broker in Nashville.
Can we start with what made it desirable, whether that's numbers or just something specific that you identified early on?
Yeah, I mean, numbers. And I mean, numbers were the main thing. Numbers and my perspective on the opportunity for growth. So I'll just like run you through the numbers really quick. So I paid, I think I paid $875,000 for the business. The SDE number that was published was 400 grand. After due diligence and a bunch of back and forth, the SDE number was actually closer to 300. And the previous owner was like deeply involved in the business, right? Like he was like in the day to day, making it happen, not really paying himself a salary outside of the SDE number. So like right off the top, if I was going to hire somebody, I knew that was coming down. Those are the base numbers. The reason it was interesting to me is because I mentioned it was based in Millington. So Millington is, like 20 minutes outside of Memphis. But they were not doing any real work in Memphis at all. Memphis is a large city, over 1 million people. There's some like pretty affluent suburbs on the east side. And this business was not like attempting to take advantage of those at all. And the rationale from the previous owner was like, well, I have as much work as I can handle in Millington. I haven't really looked to like expand into Memphis. And so that seemed like a really obvious opportunity for growth going forward. I wanted to buy something that I could grow over time and not just like buy something that would remain stagnant and stable. The other thing that made it interesting to me was the business's reputation was pretty good. Had a long-standing reputation, existing customer list on the mowing side. So we do tree work, mowing, and then like landscape work, which is like, installs, drainage work, like stuff like that. So the existing customer list on the mowing side was like pretty decent. And a lot of the landscaping and tree work would come from those customers, right? So like that was interesting to me. It was a fairly healthy business with some upside.
Now, you mentioned something not being desirable about it. You want to dive into that?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much. I did a bunch of work in the context of like the financial due diligence. I hired a guy to help with that. We had a 30-day due diligence period and really dug into the books. And the books were a mess, but I built like a good amount of confidence about the financial situation of the business. Um, and so like I think I had good clarity about what the reality actually looked like, which was, not quite as rosy as the picture that was painted on the listing, which I think is probably pretty standard. And like I said, the SDE number was closer to 300 than 400 that they claimed. But I was like fine with that. I knew I was going to have a whole lot more expenses, right? Like I was going to have to lease the lot back from the current owner. I was going to have so the owner, there's a seller note, like seller finance note for 20% of the purchase price. I knew I was going to have like that financing cost. I knew there were going to be like a bunch of additional costs. What I didn't know and what I really didn't like have the expertise to understand is how much I was going to have to spend on honestly like equipment maintenance and upkeep. I should have spent more time like really digging into the health of the existing equipment. I just kind of like wrote it off, which is like it's all like old stuff. And I just wrote it off as like, oh, these are old, like diesel trucks that have been running great forever and they'll probably continue running great. And I just didn't like do much to like dig into them. But like all the pickups, every pickup is at least 15 years old. And there are 5 of them. The bucket truck I had was like 20 years old. The grapple truck is 20 years old, right? Like, and these are all pieces of equipment that do last a long time, but um, I think if I had to do it all over again, I would have attempted to negotiate the price down quite a bit because of the age of the equipment. The only stuff that isn't super old, we have a couple mini skid steers, and those are both like 2 years old, with a decent amount of hours on them, but like in good upkeep. But everything else, other than those 2 pieces of equipment, is like old, needs to be replaced. And I didn't really like factor that in. So that's one thing. Um, the other thing is like I haven't been able to get the right people hired. So I've got some people that have been like really good. Um, but like apart from that like small core, um, hiring has been a problem that was has been much more difficult than I expected it to be. And it's just like an entirely different space than I have experience in when it comes to hiring, right? Like I've fired plenty of people. I lead a pretty large team at my day job, but it's in tech, right? And so like hiring is very different. Um, Motivating those people is very different. Keeping them engaged is very different. The tools that I have at my disposal um, to like keep them engaged and evaluate performance and like reward performance and all that kind of stuff is just like very different. And I think I probably naively, in retrospect, assumed that it would be very easy to translate my experience with managing large teams to managing the employees of the business. And some of it has translated well. Um, but like other things, I've honestly just like had to learn how to do differently, because it's just it's a different persona that is employed at a tech company than is employed at a tree company, and they need different approaches. And so again, if you're asking me about like what hasn't been super desirable, honestly, like the pain of that, just like that has been such a pain. If I didn't have to, does that sound terrible? If I didn't have to deal with people, man, this business would be so easy to run. Like people, people have been difficult.
But the truth and the reality is, like, it's the lifeblood of the business, right? Somebody's got to cut those trees. Somebody's got
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And I had always heard, like everything that I had read before, everything I'd heard, all the research I had done is like scaling a business and running a business goes through stages, right? There's like the owner operator stage where you were like in the day to day, you were making work happen, right? It's like you and like maybe a couple employees. And you can get like really good at that. But and then there's like the other end of it, which is like you have scaled the business to like 10 million in revenue and you have like hierarchies in place and processes in place and all these kind of things. And like running that business is like, you can get that to a well-oiled machine, but there's like this valley in the middle of scaling a business from like 1 to 5 million in revenue, where it is just like such a slog, where you're not big enough to benefit from some of the efficiencies of scale that you would at a larger company, but you're also too big to keep running things as they had run before. And so like that's been a lot of what I've had to deal with. The previous owner had run this business for 25 plus years, but it scaled it from just like him mowing people's lawns, over the course of like 2.5 decades to what it is. And like the way he did things worked for him, but it's just like nothing really changed as he grew things. And so like a lot of the business was run just like not really as a business, but as like a personal thing that a guy did. So like everything breaks down really, really easy the minute like one small thing goes wrong. And so like a lot of what I have been doing, especially over the course of the last couple of months, is like trying to get things to a point where we can become a well-run, like well-oiled machine. And there's so much work to do to get there. The first 6 months of ownership, honestly, the business was held together by sheer will and duct tape. Just like, I'm not gonna let this fail. And my main goal was like, don't kill it. We've gotten through that. And now I think it becomes about, okay, how do we actually like build the business that I want to have and that I will be proud of? And there's investment that's going to be required to do that. There's significantly more work that's going to be required. There's a bunch of stuff that we have to change. So, January 2nd, when we came back to work, I basically rolled out a bunch of like new policies that we're going to like start implementing. And I told the guys like, by the end of this year, I want this business to be something that I'm super, super proud of, that everybody here who works for this business can be proud of it. They have like a vested interest in it. And like, it is very clear that we are a professional organization, and we're just like so far from that.
So what are some specific things that you need to do right now? Like what is burning in your mind right now every morning when you wake up? Like, we got to get this piece figured out.
I would say there's 3 things. One, this is like so fundamental and simple, but getting the right people in place. Like basically, so one of the policy changes was like unexcused absences will not be tolerated. Tardiness will not be tolerated. I have guys just like don't show up. They just don't show up. I have guys just like roll in 45 minutes late and everybody else is like sitting around at the lot waiting for them. I'm paying people on the clock to wait for a guy because he just decided he didn't want to get up in time to get him. So it starts with that, but like the broader problem, the bigger problem is just like getting the right people in place that I can trust, that have some like sense of pride and ownership around the work that they're doing. And it starts with getting there, but then once they get there, it's about honestly just learning how to do work efficiently and profitably. Everything takes longer than it should. Everything takes way longer than it should. A perfect example of this, we're doing a big retaining wall job, like 30 grand retaining wall. When I quoted this job a few months ago, I expected us to be able to get it done in 3 weeks. If we get it done in 3 weeks, it'd be a great job for us. We'd make money on it. We've now been there, I think next week will be week number 8. Um, and it's not because we've run into a bunch of stuff that we didn't expect. It's just because guys are not working efficiently. So the job started before Thanksgiving. And so we took the time off around Thanksgiving, but I think before Thanksgiving until Christmas was basically like 5 weeks that they worked on things. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's a retaining wall that we are building out of railroad ties, just replacing an existing one. It's not really structural, it's more like visual. Over that course of time, that 5 weeks, they averaged laying 4 ties a day. 4 ties a day for 5 straight weeks. So the week of Christmas, I took off and I went and worked on the site with them for the 4 days. Christmas was on a Monday. So for the 4 days, Tuesday through Friday. And I'm like, I'm going to see how long this takes, and I'm going to run this job. And you and I, crew, are going to work side by side. And we're going to see what we can get done. We got more done in those 4 days than they had in the 5 weeks up until that point. We laid 20 ties a day. Like, this is like digging down, setting footings, like all that kind of stuff. So it's not just like dropping a tie in place, pinning it, and moving on. There's work to do, but like we were working 5 times as fast as they were. And it's not because like I have some superpower other than I'm just going to actually stay focused and make sure that everybody stays focused while they're doing it. So that to me is just like a microcosm of a lot of the work that we do. Now, listen, the quality is good, so I'm happy with the quality. But like on that $30,000 job, I'm probably gonna lose 10 grand, right? Which is just like the thing that shouldn't happen, right? So that's the main thing. So those are like the top 2. It's like honestly just getting reliable people and then doing more efficient work. And then the other is we're in a slow season right now. This was always going to be a slow season. Look back at the previous owner's books during this time. He was similarly slow. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. But lead gen continues to be a thing that I think we've got to just like continue investing in. Because I mean, along with people is the lifeblood of this business, right? It doesn't matter how good the work is, doesn't matter how many people I have willing to do work. If we don't have leads coming in, if we don't have jobs coming in that are being booked, like it doesn't matter. We'll just sit around and twiddle our thumbs, right? So I've done a bunch of work to invest in that over the course of the last few months. It's starting to pay off. But there's just like, that's a long-term investment to really make that happen. So that involves, after I bought the business, I rebuilt the website. We're doing a bunch of work in the context of like SEO right now. We've done advertising. I would love to get out of advertising. But right now it's just been like a necessary cost, and it's not a cheap one, but it's like in the short term, a thing that we just like have to do. So that's the other thing that's like top of mind is at what point are the leads going to be flowing in organically at a rate that can sustain and grow the business without me having to spend as much money on basically Google ads as I do right now.
You follow, excuse me, you followed the dumpster rental guy, Bodie?
Yeah. He and I talked.
Yeah.
He and I talked about some SEO stuff. I heard it also listened to your episode with him.
Yeah, they are doing some good work right now. Anyways, I didn't know if you'd come across some of his stuff.
Yeah.
I want to go back before we jump into kind of the lead generation, because we've had several episodes where we talk specifically about that. I think you bring an interesting perspective here because you're coming from tech. You're used to managing the persona of the team member who works for a tech company. Now you're jumping into the service business. And I want to dive into like how you're approaching hiring that person to be in the field. So like you mentioned, the crew's laying 4 railroad ties a day. You go in the field, just bring an energy and almost just like an effort and a focus to that, and you increase efficiency. So when you look at this business from a high level, how do you make sure that each crew, well, first off, how big is your crew or team size?
So we got 3 different teams. Each team is between 3 and 4 people, depending on the season and stuff. So like we run between, with office staff, we run around like 15 employees.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So the question being, how do you make sure somebody is in place to keep that focus and efficiency up moving forward? Or how are you approaching that?
Yeah, it starts with the foreman. So to be clear, I think some of this is my fault. I don't think this is all like, I think I have blame in this, and that starts with getting the right person in place that I can hold accountable to how job sites are run and how efficient they can be. And so this is one of those places where I basically just ran with what the previous owner had in place. And I have realized over time that's not good enough. And so to answer your question, how do you do that? I have that figured out on the tree crew. The tree crew is good. The tree crew is efficient. I'm happy with that. It's the other 2 crews, the landscaping and the mowing crew, where we don't have the right people in place, or the people that we have in place are not doing a good enough job, is what I should say. I actually think that they have the skill sets to do it. It is about, I think it's a lot about like making sure that they understand what I expect, which I have not done a good job of. I've just kind of like sent them to jobs and, allowed them to do their thing. And so one of the things that I'm focused on in the new year is like being much more explicit about my expectations around certain things. And so on that wall job, for instance, like I have been on site, I have communicated to them, this is what I expect to happen going forward. There's absolutely no reason why we can't maintain this pace going forward. And that job will be done probably today, maybe tomorrow. So like that has worked. But like, if I'm honest with you, I don't know that I have entirely figured out how I translate that to the next job, right? Because like not every job is a retaining wall job. If every job was a retaining wall job, it'd be very easy. And we say like, hey, the expectation is that we can move forward at this pace. And if you are not moving forward at this pace, there needs to be a good explanation or there will be consequences, right? And I think though, like the way I'm approaching it is, I think it's actually a symptom of the lack of structure and lack of intentionality around the fundamental things that exist within the business, and like the unprofessionalism with which the business has existed and been run for a really long time. And so the way that I'm approaching it is like I am rebuilding the foundations of how we exist as a business, right? I mentioned, like tardiness, unexcused absences aren't going to be tolerated. And I like the way I'm doing this, and maybe this will work, maybe it won't, but I'll just tell you how I'm approaching it. I mentioned I haven't been super clear and explicit, and so I am like over investing in clear, explicit expectations. And so we have implemented a point system where certain infractions you earn points. You don't want points, you want 0 points. Everybody starts with 0 points, but certain infractions incur points. So that's like being late, not showing up, or calling out same day, you get a certain number of points. It's little things like if your truck is a trash can at the end of the day, points. Like trucks need to be cleaned out every single day. Don't treat them like trash cans. You smoke in the truck, points. We're not treat these trucks like your personal vehicles. Like unprofessionalism, whether that's on the job or toward each other, points. There's like a long list of things, and it's like super penal. If I'm honest with you, it's not a system I want to have in place for the long term. But like right now, things are poor enough that we've just got to like attack it head on, and there would be some people who won't make it. And there are like explicit consequences for points. You get 10 points, suspended for a week, no pay. You get 20 points, you're gone, no questions, fired. Like, you saw this coming, you earn those points, fired. It's also like, again, this is silly that I even have to like implement this kind of thing, because it should have just always been in place. But like, also, just, I'm not going to tolerate any kind of drug use at all. You should expect random drug tests, right? Honestly, not a thing. Previous, employees that I had to send a guy to rehab, because I'm like, dude, your weekend warrior stuff is like starting to affect your day to day, and I'm not gonna have you. You got to go to rehab. Just like stuff like that. So I think time will tell whether or not I'm approaching this in the right way. I'm not like prideful enough to believe that I can't screw things up, or that every idea that I have is perfect or right. But the way that I interpret our current situation is like a lot of the inefficiency, a lot of the I don't know if it's unprofessionalism, but just like a lot of the things that I don't like about the business are actually symptoms of the fundamental things that I have not been successful at instituting and enforcing, and that's on me. And so the very first thing I have to do is get that fixed. And so I think probably by the end of this month, we'll be in a much better place on the foundations. And then from there, it becomes, okay, well, how do we like take that foundation and build upon it? I've seen some changes already from some of those policies. I've seen guys be much more intentional, much more communicative about what's going on. And so my hope is that that like starts to permeate longer term. And then how you hire the right people. I mean, I think what I've done in the past and what I'll probably continue to do is like, it's, you can't look at a resume and see, yeah, this guy for sure is going to be good on site. You can see they've worked at these other companies. You can call references, and I do that. But normally what I've done for hiring is like, you just have like a week or 2 week probation period where we try you out. And if at the end of that week or 2 weeks, you're not cutting it or you're not a good fit, then we move on.
How do you set that up tactically, like with your, just with the HR? Like, you bring them on as a W-2 immediately, and then just say, hey, and like explicitly in the offer letter that you have a 2 week trial period, and then we'll make a decision on whether this is a full-time or not.
Yeah. And I've even done it. I haven't been super consistent about this, but I've even done it where we say like, your pay during these first 2 weeks is actually slightly lower. And if we find that you work, we'll raise your pay. And that's, from the employee side, that kind of sucks, if I'm honest with you. That's more for like, that's an attempt for me to protect myself from a little bit of the downside, right? You bring in a guy right off the bat and you pay him $23 an hour, and he wastes 2 weeks worth of work, and you've paid him for 80 hours. I would prefer to pay significantly less than that. So I haven't been really consistent about that, if I'm honest with you, the like pay thing, and I don't know that that's really the right way to go about it. I think the probation period where we say we're going to evaluate you in the field, and then at the end of that period we're going to say yes or no whether or not you make it, makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, everybody's a W-2, and that's important for a number of reasons. Mostly my like insurance liabilities, right? Like workers' comp. I want everybody to be covered by workers' comp. Just like all that kind of stuff. All the liability insurance I have. I just want to make sure that there are like no, I don't know, no loopholes or gotchas that I fall into there by attempting to bring on a 1099.
How did you find your general manager who you mentioned you hired?
On online job posting. He was a guy who has spent his career in banking, and was like looking to get out of it. And I just had like a posting for a while. I had a few applicants. Honestly, not a whole lot of like quality applicants. The guy I hired was one of the few that was like worth a conversation with. And he has been, I think he has been really willing to learn. The main thing that I was concerned about bringing him in was I just needed somebody to make sure they understood how to price jobs, how to quote jobs. Because like I said, we have to, like, that is a constant thing. We have to continually be out quoting jobs, getting jobs. And so like, even if he didn't run the day-to-day of like crews and stuff like that, that was the main thing that I wanted to make sure he was doing well. And he's done a really good job about that. He like ramped up pretty quickly on pricing, understands kind of like where our costs are, what we need to be pricing jobs out to make money. So he did that like well, ramped up over the course of the first month or two. And then the last few months has been about, you know, like building expertise around actually running the day-to-day stuff, working in the business on a day-to-day. And so there's like just a bunch of stuff that involves. And he had to build trust with the crews so that he could actually like enforce some accountability. And I think again, on retrospect, I don't think I set him up well for success from an accountability standpoint, like his ability to actually enforce and require things of the crews, because we had not explicitly articulated what it was that we expected. And so that was another big motivator behind me rolling out all of these new policies in the new year, is like, I want it to be very clear what we expect. I want my GM to be able to like very clearly enforce these things and hold guys accountable. Now that he's built trust, now that guys, you know, think of him as their boss, he's got to have like some framework and structure for actually consistently and equitably and fairly holding the bar on these things.
How do you incentivize that role?
So he has a salary portion of his comp, and then he has kind of a commission portion. For the first 6 months, that commission has been all revenue based. Because my thought there was like, during that period of time, really his role is going to be winning jobs, kind of not really a sales role, but like, you know, like quoting things properly such that we win these jobs at the rate that we expect to win them. And so like up through December, the commission portion of his comp was just revenue based. So he got a percentage of all revenue that came through. From the beginning, I told him though, longer term, I wanted to incentivize him like a more like profit based or margin based incentive. And so at the beginning of this year, we switched to basically a net income based commission, but also one that has like, that steps up his percentage if he can increase our margins. So, you know, if like at $1.2 million revenue, our margins are 10%, he gets this percentage of that net income. If he could, at the same level of revenue, 1.2 million, increase margins to 11%, then his percentage of those profits that he gets to take increases as well. So really what I told him is I would love to make the same amount of profit with significantly less revenue. We're not super efficient. I would love to get our margins. Margin growth is what I care about this year. I don't care about revenue growth. I'm actually fine with like revenue going down if at the same time we can grow margins on that revenue. So that's how he's incentivized going forward. There's also like a overall performance bonus for him, and that's basically just like my evaluation of his performance in the role. So that's things like hiring and firing, honestly, like his ability to enforce and hold people accountable to the policies that we have in place. There's like I think 5 different points that I'm evaluating him on, and so that's like a portion of his bonus that he'll get at the end of the year if he's successful in that.
Got it. Okay, so part of our conversation leading up to this, I think this was like several weeks ago, was you buy this business.
Yeah.
You've got 3 different revenue streams.
Yeah.
You've got tree services, you've got landscaping, and you've got lawn maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
How are you thinking about those different revenue streams right now? Because essentially you've got, like, one could argue you have 3, well, maybe 2 different businesses, right? Like tree service and then lumping landscaping and lawn into one business. How are you thinking about that moving forward? Are you going to grow all 3 of those revenue streams, or are you going to look to consolidate and double down on one or the other?
I mean, honestly, the way I'm thinking about it, I think landscaping is a distraction, and I want to cut back and maybe eliminate it over time. I think longer term, we need to probably like invest significantly in tree where the margins really are, and in mowing where a combination of like good recurring revenue and brand awareness is built. But the landscaping stuff is like, for the most part, a distraction. I think it's one of those things that like the previous owner, he grew it over 2 decades, and it just like, it was a thing that he did, and then he just like continued to do it. And so if I look at our profitability across the 3 services that we offer, tree profitability is good. Like I'm happy with the margins on that. I want to continue to grow it. The issue with growing the tree side is we don't yet have like strong enough lead flow to actually like spin up another crew yet. So that's my goal for 2024 on the tree side, is like get that to the point where we can have 2 tree crews and like invest really heavily in that. On the mowing side, margins are not great, but I think it's like a necessary investment to keep our brand at the forefront of people's mind, so that when they have tree work, that's who they're calling. We get a lot of that kind of stuff, right? Like storms roll through Memphis, and so a lot of our mowing customers have a tree fall, have limbs fall. They call us first, right? That's super important. On the landscaping side, margins are like so all over the place. So we'll do, one job where margins are like, net margins are like 25%, which is awesome. You do the next job and you lose money on it, right? And landscaping, I think, more than tree or mowing, is just very unpredictable when it comes to our specific ability to finish a job in the amount of time that we expect it to finish. And we have attempted to change some of our quoting to basically like bake in the buffer. And what we find is like, we just don't win jobs if we do that. And so as things are right now, I am not confident in our ability to complete landscaping jobs efficiently enough to make money. And so what I would like to do over the course of this year is like start to dial that back and potentially get out of it entirely. The alternative there would be to uh, just like get out of the big jobs and focus specifically on the landscaping services that are like bed maintenance, planting, like the stuff, like mulching, the stuff that's like very, very predictable. We can price them in a way that both makes sense for the customer and for us. And just like only do that kind of stuff and just like ignore any of these larger jobs that could blow up in our face. Um, so that's how I'm thinking about it. The thing that is like preventing me from just like pulling the trigger on that, if I'm honest with you, it's like twofold. One, we don't yet have enough tree work for a second crew. There are two guys on my landscaping crew that I could like shift to a tree crew tomorrow. They have experience. They're great. I just need to hire another climber, but like those two other guys be grounds guys and they'd be awesome. So there's that. And so if I were to like just kill our landscaping stuff, I'd probably have to let those two guys go, and I don't want to let them go. And so like this is the other thing that like in my mind, and I'm sure other business owners like are struggling with this as well all the time. I want to make money, but like I don't want to make a profit at all costs. Like I don't want to just like treat people horribly. I didn't buy this business to just make money. I also bought this business as an opportunity to hopefully like have a positive influence on some people's lives. And that starts with the employees that I have. And so there's some like personnel decisions that probably a ruthless owner would have made differently. There's some personnel decisions that I could be making right now to increase our margins, to like lower our costs, that I haven't made yet because honestly, like I care about the people too much right now. Not too much, but like I care about them too much to make that type of decision. I think that's how it's always going to be. And so that's honestly like what's like preventing me from just moving forward really aggressively with cutting back the landscaping stuff. Is there would be consequences for people that I do not want to inflict right now. I'm okay being patient. I'm honest with you, and this is like a pretty privileged place to be, but like I'm okay losing a little bit of money while we figure this out, if it means that longer term I can like do right by some of these people that I care about, that I know are dependent upon the job that they have right now.
Well, it's an interesting situation to work through. And yeah, just from an outsider's perspective, I love the tree business. I love any sort of maintenance style business. I talk to people in the landscaping business, and look, we get asked all the time, hey, can you guys do landscaping? And I just don't say yes, because landscaping, it opens up, like you're opening up a can of worms to so much creativity and so much ambiguity on the quoting side and the estimating side. And so, I've seen some of the landscaping companies who have had some really good success. It's like they pick one thing and they focus really well. It's like, we do pavers and that's our expertise. Or we do boulder walls and that's our expertise. But I've always been curious how these landscaping companies with the design aspect and the create the actually do. And my gut instinct tells me, well, like that's a really hard business to crack unless you have it's almost like I wonder how much of that had to do with just the owner's creativity and how much he actually just like enjoyed. It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I like putting a backyard together for someone. So it's
Yeah.
it's almost like leaning into more of a hobby. Anyways,
I think you're right. I think it's a difficult thing to do well, and so I think the people who can do it well, scalably, are rewarded for it, as they should be. Hey, I mean, you mentioned it just like opens up a whole can of worms. There's also the whole like long-term liability of it too, right? Like you take on drainage work. If you don't solve that drainage problem, you have a liability there, right? You build a retaining wall. If that retaining wall doesn't hold up or doesn't do the job, you have a liability there. And so it's just like that is the other piece of it where I'm like, there's a certain class of problem that I don't want to take on long-term liability for, because I want to do a job, move on, and not think about it again. I don't want to get a call back from a customer 4 months and say like, hey, y'all came and did, you put in a French drain. Now it's settling there and all the water's pooling above it and the problem is not solved, and like get a call back and have to go back and fix it. Right. And we try to solve that by like having, like only a short period of like warranty on some of the stuff we do. But like, again, from a customer's perspective, like, you're doing this thing that I'm paying you 15 grand for. I want confidence that it's going to be holding up, 3, 5 years down the line. I don't want you to tell me that you only warranty things for 6 months. Like, that's no value to me. So it's, to your point, it's just like, it's a whole mess of things. And if you can do it well, awesome. I think there's room for companies to do things well. And there's money to be made there. If I'm honest, I just don't think that we are probably right now a company that should be investing in that stuff.
Well, you mentioned that there's opportunity in the tree side of things. And so from an outsider's perspective, I think that's a much easier problem to solve, just getting the lead flow for the tree side of business. So I'm excited for you and what you have ahead of you, Phil, and thanks for joining. I need to wrap up this podcast. I got to take my daughter to daycare here. And so I appreciate you joining on the Owner Operator podcast, sharing some insights. It's really interesting to have a little bit different perspective from someone who has purchased a business in this sub 1 million revenue range, and to see how you're thinking about solving some of these challenges. Because I believe that every business, whether you start it or whether you purchase it, once you get to that level, call it over 500 and less than 1 million, you're going to start dealing with these sorts of, if you call them problems or issues, whatever you call them, you're going to have to start making decisions around these topics. So thank you for sharing your insight.
Yeah, for sure. To be clear, our revenue, not that this really matters, our revenue is like 1.2 million, but it's definitely that size where you start to like have to figure some of these things out. You have to get structures and processes in place, or you just get stuck there. And for us, I think the danger is we get stuck there as our margins continue to erode, because those inefficiencies really start to permeate the entire business. I think my perspective, my hope is that like addressing those allows us to basically break through the ceiling that we've kind of hit on the revenue side.
Yes, apologies for misspeaking there. I took your purchase price
It's
number
fine.
and had that in my head.
It's
So
totally fine.
Thank you for joining on the Owner Operator podcast. I really do appreciate it, Phil. This is Phil
Yeah,
Hodges.
for sure.
Phil Burrows with Hodges Tree and Landscape.
Yep. That's right.
Where can people find you online if they have questions?
Well, I'm on Twitter as, I guess my handle is Tree Service Dude. I try to share full transparency around financials and all the stuff that we're struggling with there. If you want the company, it's HodgesTreeandLandscape.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for joining. We appreciate it.